My guest is Lebogang Mogashoa, who took office as South Africa's pension fund adjudicator at the end of 2025. With extensive experience in pension fund law, governance and administration, and having started his career at the office of the pension fund adjudicator, he now leads the office responsible for resolving disputes between retirement fund members and funds. I'll be talking to Lebogang about his priorities, the pressures facing the system, and the message he wants the industry to hear. So, welcome, Lebogang.
Thank you, Rianet. Thanks for the opportunity and for having me on your podcast.
I am looking forward to the discussion. So, you began your career at the office of the pension fund adjudicator and have since held senior legal and governance roles within retirement funds. How does that full circle journey shape the way you intend to lead the office?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that leading the office really requires experience and expertise in dispute resolution, in the regulation of financial institutions, but in particular retirement funds, actual experience in pension fund administration, strategic management and governance. And I think if you look at my career background up to now, it has emphasized all of these competencies, and therefore it positions me in it places me in a great position to be able to really drive the organization forward. So I think that experience is going to ensure that we issue rulings that are legally sound and that actually provide thought leadership to retirement funds. The fund administration experience that I have is going to ensure that when we do issue orders against retirement funds or administrators, we do so cognizant of the actual mechanics and the workings of a retirement fund so that our decisions are actually, the orders that we make are implementable and they are within the realm of the practicalities of fund administration. One of the big things that I think I want to do is to also drive good governance in retirement funds, but also my governance experience will enable me to lead the proper functioning of the organization and the governance of the PFA as an organization, because we can't just speak about governance only as it relates to retirement funds while we do not govern ourselves properly. So we need to make sure the organization is properly governed. But also when we formulate strategies, we do so in a way that's mindful of the future direction of the retirement funds industry to ensure that the PFA remains relevant to the industry going forward. So I think that's where the experience is really going to help me in driving the organization forward.
And I'm sure you've got quite a good team working with you, Lebogang.
Absolutely. We have a full complement, including experienced lawyers who are responsible for investigating complaints. And also I have a deputy who's very, very experienced and very supportive. And I do have corporate support services that can help ensure that while we pursue our strategic objectives, we have the resources that we need to actually achieve our strategic objectives. So we have a good team at the PFA.
Okay. Yeah, that is very critical in a role like that, I assume. So for trustees, advisors, and administrators who interact with your office, how do you define the true role of the PFA beyond simply resolving complaints, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for that question. So I always say the adjudicator and retirement funds are actually joined at the hip because we want, or we should want, the same things. And all we want as the adjudicator and what retirement funds, I think, want is to ensure that our people can retire in security and dignity. So we want the same things, and therefore we are in a mutually reinforcing relationship between us and retirement funds. Retirement funds, I like to think of them as a business in essence. They are there to create value and deliver value in a way that meets the expectations of stakeholders and the expectations of the law. And we play a crucial role in that. We hold them accountable to that, to make sure that the value that they create as retirement funds lives up to the expectations of stakeholders. And we provide real-time feedback loop for retirement funds. So we give them feedback on whether the way in which they're doing business, the way they're engaging with members meets expectations, regulatory expectations, expectations of the law, the expectations of the members, where they're falling short, and how they can actually improve. And if retirement funds and trustees use our rulings strategically and not look at them simply as wins or loss in proceedings before the adjudicator, it's actually a very important learning tool. And it helps them validate that their business practices, their products, and their services are safe, they are fair, and they are appropriate. And where there are shortcomings, they know exactly from our rulings what those shortcomings are. And I think lastly, when people use products, they want to know that there's a strong redress mechanism if something goes wrong. And us being the adjudicator and being able to provide strong redress mechanism means that we're actually reinforcing the business of retirement funds, because people can then use their products with greater confidence. So we don't look at ourselves as police officers for the industry and for retirement funds. We're actually value co-creators with retirement funds, if you look at it, because you create value, we tell you where it's falling short and what needs to improve. You go and improve that, and therefore both of us are creating value for members and retirement funds. So that's the actual real job of the Office of the Adjudicator. And we believe that retirement funds should look at us as value co-creators and not police officers.
Yeah, that's well answered. You've had time to settle in, sort of. Lebogang, what are your top priorities for, say, the first 12 months in office, and where do you believe the office needs to strengthen to evolve?
No, there are many priorities that I have, but obviously it's a shopping list, so I'm just going to look maybe at 5. I would say that 1, I need to focus on building solid relationships with internal and external stakeholders, because this is going to set the tone for our future engagement. So that's a priority that I'm working on, and even this interview is actually me reaching out to stakeholders to build that foundation. But 2, we have an increasing caseload, and maybe we can talk about that later. But we are looking at cases that are quickly surpassing any past number of complaints that we've had in the past. And our case management systems have served us well, because we've been able to overcome the backlog of cases that we had. But we can't stand still. We need to evolve our case management systems and resources to be able to absorb this increasing caseload. But also, I think people would be aware that there's work that's been done around COFI, the Financial Sector Regulation Act, the Ombud system reforms. Those things are going to impact the organization in a big way. We anticipate that they're going to have major impacts for us. So we are starting planning for that, so that we're not caught flat-footed, that we want to be prepared for that, because otherwise we can very easily go back to a backlog if we don't plan appropriately. But also, I think people will be aware that there's work that the Ombud Council is doing in terms of developing the rules, procedural rules for dealing with disputes before the adjudicator. And we need to do work to ensure that we're as prepared as possible for those rules, because they're going to require resources, they're going to require proper planning, but also change management processes with the industry to make sure that people know what's coming. But also, I also want to start working on planning for improving the accessibility of the Office of the Adjudicator. At the moment, obviously, we have an office in Gauteng only. We do have a receiving point somewhere in Oxford as well, in Johannesburg. But it's important that we look at creative ways to improve accessibility of the Office of the Adjudicator going forward. Because our data is telling us that walk-ins are still a very popular way of lodging complaints. So we just need to plan for that. So those are the priorities. But as I said, I have a shopping list, but these are the most important ones at the moment.
So, that is absolutely great. And I think your walk-ins and personal contact is a very valid one. And maybe a partnership with some of the guys in the industry would be great, because yes, that visibility is absolutely crucial.
Absolutely.
From your experience, what are the most common root causes behind the complaints reaching your office, and what should funds be doing different
Look,
to
I think
prevent those ones?
thank you. I think there are three things, as I said. One is misunderstandings or miscommunication, and I think this is one of the biggest drivers of complaints
In
that the
life, is
fund.
that not a problem?
Yeah,
Miscommunication,
absolutely. In
right?
life in general as well, and it plays out in the complaints resolution arena. But misunderstandings and communications between funds and members is a big issue. And you even see it with the two-pot rules, for example. Some complaints, it's clearly a misunderstanding of what two-pot is, what it allows and what it doesn't allow, and that leads to a complaint. But also, I think there's lack of trust, as in complainants or members do not trust that their funds will do the right thing or are doing the right thing. So even a dispute that comes before us, even if the fund has explained something that's correct, a complainant still lodges a complaint because they can't trust or they don't trust that what the fund has said is actually correct. But also we need to be honest, there's wanton disregard for the law that plays out. And this is especially so in the Section 13A issues. And Section 13A, I'm referring to outstanding contributions, non-payment of contributions. There are employers who just disregard their legal obligations to pay contributions, and that is a big issue. I think it accounts for about just under 50% of our caseload. It's not sustainable, but it's things that we hope to see retirement funds taking action themselves to try to recover those contributions rather than leaving it to members to try to recover those contributions on their own. So those are the three, I think, primary drivers of those complaints.
With regulatory reform, the two-pot system, and increasing financial pressures on members, are you anticipating shifts in the nature or the volume of complaints?
I think this is already happening by and large. I did mention that we are in uncharted territory in terms of complaints. So we are anticipating, I looked at historic data, the volume of complaints we are expecting by the end of this year. Our projections say we'll get over 13,400 complaints. That's uncharted territory. We've never dealt with that volume of complaints before. And one of the biggest drivers of this is actually the two-pot system. Because as I said, sometimes it's misunderstanding, but it's also because sometimes complainants come to complain because the benefit has not been paid, and an investigation shows that it's because the employer has not paid contributions. So two-pot is actually interlinked with other types of complaints that we see, and it's driving an increase in the volume of complaints, but also the nature of complaints. We're seeing people questioning why a component of the benefit is retained in the fund, why it can't just be paid to them. As we're approaching the end of the tax year now, we're anticipating an increase in complaints because people will be claiming their two-pot payments, and there will be complaints there, whether it's about the quantum of the benefit or whether it's delays in payment of the benefit. So we're expecting that, and it's a key driver in the caseload that we have.
What message would you most strongly like to send the pension fund trustees and the pension principal officers about their fiduciary responsibility and engagement with members?
Yeah. Look, I want to couch this within the context of Section 13A, fiduciary duties within the context of employers who do not pay contributions. And I want to remind trustees and retirement and principal officers that they're actually fiduciaries of the fund, and therefore they owe a duty to act in the best interest of the members and the fund in ensuring that they take steps to recover these contributions. So they need to be seen in line with their fiduciary responsibility to be taking action to protect the interests of the members by going after these employers who do not comply with the law and recovering those contributions without being concerned about upsetting the employers, because I understand employers are also their clients, but they should not be feeling bad about taking that action because it's a fiduciary expectation. And therefore, they should also look at other options that can maximize the effectiveness of recovering those contributions, including seeking orders against the people who are responsible for running those businesses, because the law does allow that you can actually pursue an order against the responsible person where contributions are not paid. So I just want to remind trustees and principal officers that it is their fiduciary duty to recover those contributions, and we should not leave it to members themselves to try to recover those contributions. Funds themselves should take the initiative and should pursue those contributions.
And if there are any of those employers listening in, maybe a message to them.
Yeah, a message to them is that they need to remember that by not paying these contributions, it's doing damage to the fight against retirement fund savings inadequacy. Because what it really means is that our people that are working so hard and not having their money paid over to retirement funds are actually going to retire without nothing and become a burden to the state. And we don't want that. And therefore, we are encouraging them to do the right thing, to make sure that they pay those contributions because they're expected by law to do so. And not doing so, especially when you deduct them from a member's salary, is actually criminal conduct. And it's not something that we want to see.
Lebogang, long term, what would success look like for you, not just for the Office of the Pension Fund Adjudicator, but for the broader retirement fund ecosystem?
Yeah, I think from a PFA perspective, as I said, we're anticipating 13,400 complaints. But if you look at it in context, there are millions of members in South Africa, and therefore 13,400, although we say it's a big caseload, we need to remember within context, it's actually only a fraction of the members, potential complainants who are out there. So we need to do what needs to be done to reach out to those people so they know what their rights are, what remedies they have, and that they can use the Office of the Adjudicator. But from an industry perspective, I would want to see at the end of my term, when I look back, I want to see a culture of compliance and good governance, which happens by default in retirement funds. And I want to be able to look back and say some of the work that I did as the adjudicator has instilled that compliance, culture of compliance and good governance, because corporate governance is actually not just for listed companies. It's the primary ingredient for positive member outcomes. And therefore, in the space of retirement funds, which are really public interest vehicles, corporate governance is an absolute non-negotiable. But also I want to see greater levels of confidence in our retirement fund system, because people are confident that there's a sound, robust mechanism to provide redress if something goes wrong. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Lebogang. It's really great to chat to you, and I hope you fulfill all those goals that you've set. And we're looking forward to watching what's happening at the PFA.
All right. Thank you so much, Rianet. I really appreciate the opportunity.